Welcome to the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. I'm Laurie Rivers with you, here to help you with some inspiration to get those aspirations out into the world. And today, it is Monday. As always, the podcast drops on Mondays, hoping to give you a boost to your week. And whether we're going to work or we're doing the household chores or we're taking the kids to school, I've got all the good info for you. Now, this week is going to be an interesting week. Do not clutch your pearls. Interesting doesn't mean bad. It's kind of a mixed bag. There might be some intensity to the week, but if anything, we'll almost feel like somebody unplugged us out of the socket. Okay, because today, August 28th, 2023, Uranus stations retrograde. So for all you fixed signs out there, especially you Taurus risings, suns, Mercury's, Venus, and Mars, you should be feeling maybe a little more relaxed. Uranus is stationed retrograde. It'll stay retrograde until January of 2024 when it turns direct to cause more mischief and mayhem until next August in 2024. So you've got some time to calibrate. You've made a lot of changes. You've grown a lot. You've been shaken and stirred. And all of us have Taurus in our charts. So if you're not sure how to look at your astrology chart, make sure you go to my YouTube videos, or if you're a patron, those are linked up in your Crunch Report emails that I send out every couple of days. And you can look at to find where Taurus is in your astrology chart. So we have Uranus retrograde. This is going to give us some relief. Mars in Libra isn't really making any aspects to anything, not much, until the end of her 6-week transit. So not really till October. And we're not going to talk about October just yet. Okay, it's a little bit like Bruno. We don't talk about it right now. Then on the 30th, we have that full moon in Pisces. And yes, it's a blue moon. But kind of. And I'll talk about that later here in the podcast. There's a lot of potential with this full moon. It could be really, really good. So we'll talk about that. And then we have the moon in Aries in opposition with Mars. And basically that's where the intensity is going to come in with Mars and Libra until October, which we're not going to talk about right now. It'll be through the lunations, and that's the lunar transits. Remember, the planets move. They keep moving. They like to move it. And so your natal chart is a static picture, and the transits move outside of that wheel. And I have a video on that too. It's very visual, and it walks you through the basics, because that's basic astrology. Okay. So make sure you watch those videos. I'll link up the Patreon and I'll link up the YouTube, and you can check those out. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about this week, what we can expect, and how to really kind of manifest yourself through the week, how to reveal yourself through the week, because that's what manifest means. It isn't about abracadabra, siskumba, or a la peanut butter sandwiches. Oh, I've got some magic going on. It's really about allowing yourself to be the most of yourself in any given moment. I know. You want the car, you want the house, you want the lover. Get yourself in alignment, and you'll find out what really matters to you. Speaking of that, Venus stations direct on September 3rd. And we'll talk a little bit about that and how you can get ready for it, because you better have your basket ready after this full moon and with Venus stationing direct. And yes, Monday the 4th, Jupiter stations retrograde, but that's not a bad thing. Jupiter's been causing some trouble with it, with Mars and Virgo throughout the last couple of weeks. That's why it was so intense we're not going to have to deal with that. So the intensity dies down until October, or really the end of September. But I'll give the September update next week. So this episode, we're going to talk about that blue moon, what makes a blue moon. And I'm going to make this a two-parter. Because now I have a patron-only podcast because Patreon partnered up with Spotify and my audio posts can be played on Spotify. I am so excited about that. Yeah. It's something I knew was coming and I was waiting for it. So we have this public podcast and we've got the patron-only podcast, because without my patrons, there is no podcast. And you know how I love you up. So we'll do our patron shout-outs in this episode, and I'll do a little bit of astrology Q&A in this episode. And what I've really been doing is doing special patron-only podcasts with those questions as well. So if you're a patron, make sure you ask your questions on the Googly sheet, because I'm powering through those now, that I don't just do them a little bit at the end of every podcast here. No guest today, but we'll be having a guest on for next week. All right, let's talk about that blue moon. All right, so the internet is all in a hubbub over the blue moon because it's a super moon. And people keep using these words. I feel a little bit like Inigo Montoya. People keep using these words, but they don't mean what I think they think it means. So, what's a supermoon? First of all, a supermoon is when the moon is closer, physically closer to Earth. Okay, so that makes things a little more intense because of gravity. Okay, so people who do not hold their consciousness well are probably going to be acting out. And we'll probably see a lot of, by the way, if you're a healthcare worker, heads up, you might see a lot of ODs. You might see some psychotic episodes. You might see some spiritual psychosis. That could be a big one. Guys, don't use psychedelics to connect to the divine. Okay, you don't need it. You really don't. Your brain is designed to connect to the all that is. I don't care what Timothy Leary said, okay? Promise you, you are designed to connect. Now, the microdosing for mental health reasons under supervision, that's a different story. But if you want to connect to the all that is, the all mother, the all father, the creator, however you want to see it, however you want to say it, you don't need any substance to do it. You need to learn how to meditate properly, and then you'll blow your own mind. So the supermoon is in this full moon is in Pisces. It is a supermoon. It is a blue moon insofar as it is the second full moon in a calendar month. But remember, our calendar is arbitrary. Okay. A seasonal full moon is rarer. And that is when in an astronomical season, you have four full moons instead of 3. All right. And the third is called a blue moon. The last time this happened, last time we had a seasonal blue moon, that was back in 2021, back in August. Remember how that went? The next time it happens is August of 2024, because, it's 2024. And 2024, yeah. We don't talk about 2024 yet. Just wait till November when I do the updated year ahead seminar. Then we'll talk about it. It's a crapshoot. So this is just a blue moon. It's not a seasonal blue moon. So it's not quite the big deal everybody's making it out to be, other than the supermoon part. The supermoon part, that's going to make this a little interesting. The other thing with this full moon, now remember it's in Pisces because the sun is in Virgo. Pisces is the opposite sign to Virgo. That's what makes a full moon, right? Is when the sun and moon are opposite signs. So the sun fully illuminates the moon. Because the moon doesn't have any light of its own. The moon will pass over Saturn before it becomes full. Now, this becomes full at around 6:19 p.m. Pacific. That's about 9:19 p.m. Eastern. And about, 8 hours before that, we'll have the moon conjunct Saturn. This is an amazing time to solidify things that you really want to have happen. But you got to use your imagination. If you're one of those people who says, I want to be famous, but nobody like me ever gets there. My nose is too big. Or I want to have money, but I don't want to, I don't want to get off my couch. It's the but or the I don't wanna that you're putting emphasis on. Okay. And so you're sending mixed signals to the universe. This is a time to be crystal clear, absolutely crystal clear, and imagine it. Write a story, write a fairy tale. And people say, but Laurie, that stuff doesn't work. Okay, humor me. All right? Just try using your imagination. Now, in part 2, I'll give you a step-by-step exercise to try out. That just do it because, nothing to lose by trying, right? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? All right. So this full moon is in Pisces. On a mundane level, hear me out. It is the mundane. This means collective unconscious, physical things, like the weather, like political stuff, things that don't use their brains, okay? In the same way as an individual human being or the collective consciousness. The collective unconscious is where the reactivity is. So I think we might be seeing people act out, especially in the morning before the moon moves, into Pisces. The night before. Because the moon in Aries will square off with Pluto the night before the full moon. So we'll wake up a little bit unsettled. It'll be really easy to have your focus disrupted. So doom scrolling is not your friend on the 30th of August. I don't care how compelling Muscles and Nursing is. Muscles and Nursing is a cool guy. Okay? We're mutuals, all right? But, and just check in later after the full moon. You can watch his videos the next day, all right? I'm not going after Muscles, but he does bring a lot of stuff up, right? And if you're constantly looking at this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. Now, if he's gloating over something he got right, absolutely give him the love because he deserves to gloat. If you don't know who I'm talking about, he's on TikTok. And so anyway, I'm just saying, if people keep bringing up situations on the 30th, especially in the beginning of the day, because you want to set your energy ahead of this full moon, you might feel a little weepy. You might need to release a little bit. You might feel that way days ahead of it because we have to let go of stuff in order to receive more. Full moons are always about a harvest, okay? There's nothing you need to do except get ready with your harvest basket to receive a bushel of stuff. Okay? All right? Now, if we're leaning into fear, that's going to manifest. All right? You give yourself, if you're going to worry, you're going to worry about more worry. You're going to give yourself stuff to focus on that's going to provoke worry. Yes, we will probably have some more bad COVID numbers. When have I ever told you the pandemic is over? When have I ever told you to stop masking? Never. I've told you. I've told you on TikTok. I've told you on this podcast. Mask up. Mask up. Mask up. It's important. All right. Is it foolproof? No. Neither is a condom. But it's better than going bareback. There's worse things than pregnancy. I'll talk about this later. But anyway, I know the children might be listening on the way to school. Ignore what Auntie Laurie said, my darlings. All right. However, I don't think it's ever too young to start with knowing that you should be careful and respectful of your body and yourself and other people's. Oh, she's hot tonight. And I don't mean that kind of hot, get your minds out of the gutters. I know I put them there, but we're taking them right back out. All right. I think we could see issues with dams, levees, seawalls. I think we could see some big precipitation be brewing. This could be tropical storms. Those tropical storms could become hurricanes. This could be moving into the Gulf of Mexico. This could be coming out of the Atlantic, and we could see something brewing in the Southern Pacific. We might be looking at more tropical weather as well. I think any real big storms will probably come like maybe September 1st, potentially. Oh my God, did I say that the moon was going to square off with Pluto before this? Never mind. After. My God, I'm getting old. Ignore that part that I said. I'm not going to re-record. Sheesh. All right. So this full moon will probably, again, I think we'll see some mental health issues in the news. I think we'll hear more about failed public health policy. I think we're going to hear people urging people to mask up as they continue to. I think we're going to see big spikes yet again. And maybe not just in COVID. This could be RSV. It could be the flu. There's multiple things going on. People have really been doing summer this year. And I get it. We had our world rocked starting in 2020, right? But here's the deal. We're not going back to normal. It's not going back to the way it was. Nothing ever goes back to the way it was. You can't, just like you can't go home again, right? It's never going to be the same. I go home and hell, my childhood home isn't even there. Not gonna lie, that was a little bit brutal to try. I hadn't really looked at it. And my parents sold it in 2016 and oof, that was a little brutal, not gonna lie. But yeah, things change. Life has one thing that is constant, and that is change. And we're in a time of accelerated change. So we're going to see people reacting. That's why we keep hearing, I want it to be like the good old days, when you could beat your wife and nobody cared. Yeah, Bob, that was great. Let's go back to that. Not. If we're going to go back to anything, can we have Daria reruns? Sheesh. There is no golden age, folks, and it was never better. Climate was probably in better shape, but we have never had a golden age socially. Not really. Maybe very small groups of people managed to have something cohesive for a time, but not long term. So, we're going to hear and see about more change. There could be some seismic activity with this. I don't see any great potentials, but let me double check. It's most likely, if we have any seismic activity, it could honestly be today, August 28th, with Uranus stationing retrograde. The station tends to be a day of where there's like not the greatest stability. And with Mercury retrograde, this could be maybe kind of like a replay. Sorry, I'm taking a look. So I'm looking at the full moon date. Actually, it might be Mexico City. Might want to keep an eye out. Mexico City, keep your eye out. There might be a little bit of seismic activity. I don't think it's horrendously bad, but there might be some of the volcanic activity going on too. There might be some offshore activity off the coast of maybe Central America, the northwest part of South America. Maybe even into the Caribbean. There could be some stuff going on seismic wise. So maybe in the California, I don't really see it happening so much in California. It maybe mid to northern California. There's maybe, but I don't even think it'll go to like a 6.0. So not the big one in California, at least not through what I can see. Remember, I'm not a seismologist, I'm an astrologer. Damn it, Jim. I'm an astrologer, not an engineer. That's original Star Trek for you younger people out there. I know I'm being silly, but I'm hot and I'm tired and I got to go to bed here in a little bit. So I'm trying to get this podcast made. Whine, whimper, whimper. Oh, are we there yet? Are we done with our commute? Did we stop at Starbucks? Can you get me a Trenta iced coffee with 4 pumps of vanilla, an extra half and half? Thank you. So the full moon, I think on a mundane level, we'll see some very, very interesting headlines. What's up for Trump? Because doesn't he have a court date? What is up for Trump? I will do a little bit of research and talk about that in part 2 in the Patron only podcast. We'll take a look at Trump. We'll do that in the second part, in part 2 of this episode. That'll be Patron only. I'm excited about that. I'll put a link so if you guys want to hear it. All right. You could join Patreon if you're not already a member. There's lots of perks and bennies. You know, you get really, really good discounts, right? Whew. All right. Speaking of Saturn, before I move into patron shoutouts, I've got a Saturn class coming up September 10th, and it is Beyond the Saturn Return. We're going through the timing of life as per Saturn. I'm going to blow your mind and change your perspective about Saturn and explain how it kind of builds you up to tear you down to build you up again. It's a little bit like a drill sergeant, but why it's important in life and understanding your life's timing so you can make the most out of any future transits and make sense of the past. That's coming up September 10th. I put the link in the podcast description. So let's see, patron shoutouts are next, and then I think we're going to talk a little bit about Uranus Retrograde. I'll come back to the full moon, but I think after telling you about, dams breaking, potential seismic activity, COVID and healthcare bogusness, which, by the way, we're not going to have another lockdown. The people saying that online, look, if somebody's, and I'm not disparaging youth here, but there is no way in hell you're really, really good at predicting with a great amount of accuracy any event if you're really young and you don't have a lot of experience, because it takes a lot of time and study to be very good at it astrologically. And if you've only studied astrology for a couple of years, you're probably not going to be really accurate. It takes time. Like, people like me have like steamer trunks full of notebooks of notes we've taken, so it used to be, we used to say, don't even try to predict until you've been at it at least 5-6 years. Predict to yourself, but just in public, you don't want a low batting average. You want to know when you could be confident in your predictions. So, I think we're going to see the weather up, and I don't know that we're going to see temperatures lower enough. That would be nice. I'm in Southern California. I'm melting. But other than that, on a personal level, though, this full moon, man, it's awesome. And if you can harness its energy, you just slingshot forward starting next week with Venus direct. So again, I'll talk about that in part 2. But I'll talk a little bit about Venus direct at the end of the podcast. I think it's time for a little bit of a break. I'll do patron shout outs, and we're going to talk about patron discounts there. So if you're not a patron, go ahead and eavesdrop this part. But I got to give my shout outs, because without patrons, there is no Awake Space Astrology Podcast. And they need to know the juice. They need to know what juice they're getting. There's some juicy ones going on. All right, you heard the music. You know what's up. It's time for patron shoutouts. So what do we got going on coming up in September? We got a couple of neato things. So first of all, we're doing Chiron in Planet of the Month Club starting in September. So we're doing Chiron. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Probably at the end of this podcast, we'll talk a little bit more about Chiron and let people know. We'll do that in the Q&A, because I get a lot of questions about it. And I'll also be teaching the Saturn class. Now, if you are a patron at the $5 to the $22 level, you save $100 on the Saturn class. That is beyond the return. We're looking at the Saturn cycle. It's a 2-hour workshop. And I'm going to explain it in a way that you don't necessarily have to be, even an advanced student to understand. I'm going to make it really visual. You know me. Katie Porter has been my example. I bring the whiteboard. In the last class for intermediate, somebody said, "Hey, it's getting pretty Madden here," like football plays. But I'll have lots of visuals and a workbook that'll help you understand Saturn a whole lot more. If you're at the $33 to $55 levels, you save $144 on the class, making it $33. That is an incredible savings. So, patrons, go find the post where I put your discounts. Also, I have a couple spots left. You guys save 20% on the group reading on Tuesday. I know I had the wrong coupon code in. That has been fixed. Read your crunch report or go into Patreon. Go to patreon.com/the Awake Space. All right, I've given all the news. Now, let's thank our most recent patrons, because without you, there is no me. Now, I just thank the new ones, but I am forever grateful to all of you. In fact, I got to meet patron number 1, Sarah Bear, in Oregon City, and that was such a joy. My very first patron who stayed with me all this time. It's crazy. But anyway, so big thanks to Paula, Christy, Nancy, Angela, Gabriella, Emily, Jessica, Katrina, Lene, Sarah, Alma, Deborah, Marilyn, CM, Vivian, and Valerie. Thank you all so much for being patrons. Such a pleasure. So awesome to have you all here. And super, super excited. Alrighty, my friends. You guys get extra special podcast episodes as well. So remember, we have a partnership with Patreon and Spotify, and all of my audio content is now accessible when you link up your Patreon account to Spotify. And you can, I've got some posts in Patreon that explain how to do that. But that's pretty exciting. I'm wanting to make more audio, because audio is my favorite. Way more favorite than video. I know I haven't done any YouTube videos in a little bit because I'm hot and I'm sweaty and I don't feel like it. Wine. All right. Let's get back to talking about important stuff like Uranus stationing retrograde today, Monday, August 28, 2023. Dun dun dun. Uranus stations retrograde today, August 28th. Now, what does that mean? Well, like I said earlier in the podcast, some of what that means is you might feel a little more relaxed than you felt in a while, because Uranus kind of feels like you've got your finger in the light socket. So for you Taurus placements especially, but also Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, the fixed signs, you should all have a little bit more relief. A little bit. You might be able to sleep a little more, or you might have more energy. It just depends on how you personally have been resonating with the energy. What does this mean beyond that? Now, everybody has Taurus in their charts. I talked about that earlier. Make sure you watch the videos where I walk you through understanding your natal chart, and I have another one on transits and how to find those. It's not so hard. Okay. It takes time to understand it all. But if you look at the area where Taurus is in your chart, you might have some relief, or at least less stress. Okay. I really do think the first couple of weeks of September are going to, they certainly won't be dull and boring, but I think we get a bit of a breather, especially with Venus direct, and especially since Jupiter's stationing retrograde too. It's been really intense the last few months. I know, since 2020. It's going to continue being intense, but every once in a while, the universe gives us a minute to catch our breath. And that's our opportunity right now, is to look back. Look at how much you've grown. Yeah, you're not the same person you were in 2019 or 2018. But if you were really honest with yourself, were you really authentically you, or were you playing a role? And maybe that was more comfortable, right? Maybe you weren't as authentic, but you didn't have to think so hard or move so fast or pivot to the next direction or, right? But if you get down to the heart of it, you are more of who you were born to be now than you were in 2019. Waking up is not easy, okay? When you realize the injustices of the world, or just how much the rat race was getting to you, and that you actually really never stopped liking X, Y, or Z. You just stopped having time to do it. And maybe you realized you were worth more than you'd been letting yourself think you were worth. And maybe you decided you wanted to change in your relationships. Maybe you found out you weren't being authentic to yourself in relationship with you, let alone anybody else. Maybe you'd overcompromised yourself at work, at home. Maybe you'd lost yourself along the way. So many people come to me and say, Laurie, I feel lost right now. And my first question I ask is, what is it like to feel found? Have you ever thought of that? What is it like to feel found? Because are you really lost? Or are you having to be deliberate and intentional about your life in a way you've never had to be before? And if that is the case, God bless you. I would love to know what that is like. I've never had that opportunity to just live life on autopilot. I don't know what that's like. I know what it's like to live in a Groundhog's Day, which is, miserable. But I don't know what it's like to live life on autopilot. So if that might have seemed easier, and you'd be like, but I was being successful and now all of it's changed. But were you? Did you describe that success yourself? The world, the entire planet is going through massive systemic change. And I can guarantee you by the winter of 2024, 2025, we are going to have to once again overhaul how we do things. So don't get too comfortable yet. There are many more changes up ahead that we have to meet with solutions. And this Uranus retrograde is giving us a chance to review how we have grown, not just what's been disrupted, not just what's been lost. Okay. You need to, that Malcolm barks are free, remember that. You need to understand how valuable you are, and that you have skill sets, that you have abilities, that you are able and capable of growing in different directions, of learning new things, of letting go of the past and reshaping your present so you can meet an uncertain future. On Sunday at Coffee with Laurie, people asked me how I made it through some of the more challenging times in my life. And was it because I'm clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, claircognizant, all the clairs? Was it because of those skills? And I laughed and I said, there was this time where nothing was working. Nothing was working because I was going through a hell of a Pluto transit. Jupiter was on my moon. Pluto was approaching the square to my moon, so it was in square with Jupiter. Ooh-wee. That was intense. And nothing was working out. Nothing was going to plan. I couldn't hold anything without dropping it. Nothing was working. And it was scaring the hell out of the people who cared about me. They're like, what are you going to do? What if you end up in your car? And I'm like, then I end up in my car. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. And they'd be like, how do you know? I'm like, I just know. I just know I'll be okay. I don't know what okay looks like, but I know I'll be okay. I'll be okay. And I was certain of that. And I was okay. And I got more okay. And I'm better than I've ever been now. But 5 years ago, or 6 years ago now, God, time flies. 6 years ago, I didn't know how I'd be okay. I just knew because I was used to pivoting. I was used to having to let go of things I thought I needed that were really important, like status, prestige, money, that thing you pay rent with. I had to let go of this over and over and over in my life, over and over and over. And in 2017, I was facing a potential loss of the things that mattered most to me, that were worth more than money. These were really important relationships to me. But the one relationship I couldn't afford to lose at that time was with myself. And that was the one I was building. That was the one that was coming up through the chaos. And that's what you need to look at now. Who have you become? Not what has become of you. Who have you become in all these years of shakeups and change? And yes, it is nerve-wracking to face uncertainty. When I said I knew I'd be okay, it didn't mean I wasn't freaked out or scared or had moments of like, what the hell am I doing? Of course I did, but I knew I'd be okay. Again, I didn't know what okay would look like. And there was this just magical time, sometimes in our dire straits, where all we have is faith. And faith is just believing something is possible without any evidence. You don't have to have a religion to have faith. Sometimes the most magical times in our lives are where the ones where that's all we've got. And I know a lot of people got to remain comfortably numb, comfortably unaware, comfortably robotic in their daily lives. They got up, they got their coffee, they got in the car, they went on the commute. And this is not judgment, but this was daily life for so many people. And then all of a sudden, everything stopped. They had to face themselves in the mirror. They had to look at their life. And all of a sudden, they had the opportunity to not wear hard pants. I have been hard pants free for many, many years. I weirdly, in 2019, decided to enter the hard pants world, but thank God that didn't last very long. Viva the sweatsuit. That's all I have to say. I love my sweats and my hoodies. Comfy is where it's at. But this Uranus retrograde is an opportunity to assess who you are innovating into. It's a good time to journal that. And the fact that it happens right before this Pisces full moon on the 30th is really kind of cool, because this is where we get to imagine ourselves into being. Imagine a new reality for ourselves. Imagine ourselves in a new set of stability, a new reality. So many times people are worried and fearful, so much so that you can't see the opportunities if they bitch you in the behind. Right? Don't go that direction. There is nothing wrong with using your imagination. So many of you in your 30s and maybe 40s got hosed in the educational system by having art and music and dance taken out of school, where you were told, be a realistic, get a real job, be logical, don't do any of that art stuff or that music stuff. It's not all that, it doesn't require discipline. That's what the sports people would love to say. So at least when I was in high school, I'd be like, are you kidding me? I was a classical singer. Let me tell you how much I had to practice and how much music theory I had to study, and not to mention the sit-ups I had to do. Ugh. You got robbed, because creative self-expression and the arts and being inspired and taking that frustration or that angst and turning it into something beautiful is a human quality that we cannot afford to have dimmed. And it puts people into an apathetic state if all they do is access their logic. You lose your sensate and sensational quality of life, right? When I was a teenager and before the abuse stopped, I was I was training in classical music, especially before 15. I was learning. And I was singing an aria, a small aria, called Se ben crudele. It's an Italian aria. And I sang it with such grief and pain, because it's about being betrayed and it's about heartbreak, that my teacher stopped me and said, is this going on at home? I said no, and it was the truth. That whatever she was asking about wasn't happening. And I just left it there. And she said, no one your age could sing with that kind of feeling if they hadn't experienced betrayal in some way. And I just looked at her and I shrugged. I said, I don't know. I don't know why I can do it. And of course she knew. She was an old lady. She knew. She knew I was going through something. But music allowed me a catharsis for all the anger and pain and trauma to be alchemized into something beautiful and wholesome. As wholesome as a pure sounded note. And that's why we're robbed, and we've robbed the children who became adults from these experiences of being creative, whether it's through music, the arts, dance, crafting, even if you're crocheting a beanie, there's an opportunity to transform something like anxiety into a useful object. There's a book called Crochet Saved My Life, and I was part of that project. I don't know, I think it came out in like 2012. I think it's probably still up on Amazon. My last name wasn't Rivers at the time. I claimed my name back in 2018. Yes, you've been shaken. Yes, you've been stirred. And yet, it was to your benefit, because that disruption is like, think of like lasers knocking off bits of corrosion on the exterior of the real you. And you are being shaken up into yourself. And Pluto's just waiting in the wings, because Pluto and Uranus are trine right now. And this opportunity to alchemize through the change, it is so powerful, so powerful. Imagining who you are becoming. But you got to use your imagination. Don't you dare be illogical. Don't you dare give yourself reasons to fail. Think of all those times people say, well, what if it doesn't work? Why don't you ask, what if it does? What if it works? What am I going to do if it works? Where am I going to go next? What am I going to do next? I used to have a sign on my desk. If at first you do succeed, try not to look astonished. Why do people focus on the failures? Half of all businesses fail in the first 2 years, which means half don't fail. Right? Pardon my Sagittarius Mars, but I believe in a little bit of optimism. Notice I'm not telling you to close your eyes and pretend nothing's happening. You can imagine a better future and wear a mask. And if you're a little one listening with your mommy or daddy, don't complain when they ask you to wear a mask. It's a fashion statement. You look cute. Okay. I know they're not comfortable. I don't like stuff on my face either. But it's okay to wear them. Oh. You've gone through a lot. And you've made it this far. By golly, I wonder how much further you can go and how much higher you can climb. and how you can sail on those warm thermal currents. In my head, I see a red-tailed hawk soaring on the wind, wings spread wide, tail fanned out, eyes seeking so far that we can't imagine how clear and far they see, that clear vision and effortless gliding. That's the energy of Uranus retrograde, trine Pluto in Capricorn. That's pretty cool. It's pretty cool, my friends. And it's happening right before the full moon, where we imagine a new reality for ourselves. And then Venus direct. You'd better have your bucket ready to catch things. If you've been doing the work, the momentum is gonna push us all forward. All right. Let's do some astrology Q&A. Okay, before we get to the astrology Q&A, let's talk about Trump a little bit, and I'll give some more details. I'll give some of his astrology in part 2 of the patron-only podcast. But let's just take a look at the timing that we've got here. Where? Oh, here we go. Here we go. I'm finding the news stories. I have so many tabs open. It's scary. All right. So this is from CNN. It says Americans are about to learn significant new details on the timing and substance of the trials of Donald Trump, even as the former president and Republican frontrunner. Well, do they really have any front runners other than chickens with their heads cut off? But anyway, steps up his effort to alchemize his unprecedented legal peril to boost his White House bid. Whoever wrote this was enjoying it. They've got 2 key hearings on Monday, one in Georgia and one in Washington. And Trump's quadruple criminal indictments into a new phase, following the extraordinary scenes and political maneuvering that culminated in the release of Trump's booking mugshot last week, where he looked really silly. All right, so I don't have any times on these cases, but I do know that the day starts out with the moon conjunct Pluto and square the node. So it's very historic, and he's probably not going to get great news. Now, you've probably heard that Fani Willis, there's an effort to remove her as a district attorney. And that might happen. I looked at her chart. We don't have a birth time for her, but her Pluto's at 0 degrees Libra, and that means Mars is right on top. Now, that can go a couple of ways. That can be a lot of pressure. I just went through that transit. It could be a lot of pressure, but it can be a lot of power. She knew this could be the case, so we'll see. I'm not that concerned. Mercury's retrograde. We got a lot of retrograde action going on, so we'll see what happens. We'll see. So in Georgia, Fulton County's district attorney Fani Willis will first sketch substantive evidentiary arguments in any of the cases facing Trump in a hearing on ex-White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows' bid to get his state case moved to federal court. Meadows and Trump have been charged along with 17 others, blah, 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 blah. At the same time, in Washington, Judge Tanya Chutkan will hold a status hearing to consider dueling arguments by special counsel Jack Smith and Trump's defense team over a date for the trial in the federal investigation into Trump's alleged attempt to prevent now President Joe Biden from taking office. Smith wants the trial to begin January 2nd, 2 weeks before Trump's first big test in the 2024 primary race in the Iowa caucuses. And then they, of course, want it to happen, in 2026. I don't know that Trump is going to be all that happy with the outcomes. We may see more lawyers fired. Will there be any lawyers left? Is that his goal? Is he trying for, inadequate representation or something? Because he can't even get away with mental incompetence because he did that whole bogus, mental fitness while he was president, and the doctor was well paid enough to say, oh yeah, sure, he's competent. My ass, he's competent. I don't know that that man has ever been competent. But anyway, I will talk more about the astrology of what's going on. Tomorrow's a pretty volatile day. And I don't think with Uranus retrograde even that he's going to luck out too much. And it won't even be retrograde till I think later in the day, but let me double check that, because I don't know. I can triples check stuff and it'll still be like, no, you must have looked at it wrong, Laurie. Jeez. But I'm pretty sure we do not have Uranus retrograde till later, but I could be wrong. It is now the 28th as I'm recording. I started on the 27th. Let's double check. Yeah, it's not retrograde till at least... I know it's retrograde by 6 p.m. my time, but it's not retrograde in the morning, especially morning on the East Coast. So it hasn't stationed yet. It's still in direct motion. It is almost right on top of his midhaven. I just don't see this being a favorable day for him, and I will talk about that in the patron-only side of things in part 2 of the podcast. So there's that. Let's talk a little bit about Venus retrograde. Venus stations direct on September 3rd. Now, this is going to be really good for you guys, because if things have been slow, if things haven't been quite going the way you want them, it's been a kind of a volatile summer, and yet people have taken summer off. Look at the COVID numbers. People have been social. Aren't we lucky that people have tried to get their lives back? I say that with sarcasm. But if you've got a business, if you've got, been trying to find a job, if you've been trying to get sorted, things work out a little bit for you. Once Venus stations direct, get your bucket ready. This is coming right out of the full moon. So this should be good stuff. I'm kind of looking forward to it. I've got so much material I need to write and get produced and what have you. And Venus is back in my 9th house. And so I'll be working on production matters. So that should be kind of cool. So there is that. Let's do some astrology Q&A to round up this episode. Let's do some Q&A. How's the drive going? You doing all right? Did you make it into work yet? If you haven't, keep your hands on the wheel. I know it's a little crazy out there. I do. I know it's a little wild. All right. Let's see. I answered that in the last Patreon-only podcast episode. Don't you guys feel special? Isn't that fun? All right, this is for Jessica. You reminded us in the last podcast that Mercury has more of a Virgo energy when retrograde as opposed to Gemini when direct. Is there enough data on Pluto to qualify its retrograde energy in a similar way? Yes, actually. All of the planets will behave that way, those that go retrograde and direct. So, especially if they have dual dual rulerships. If they don't have a dual rulership, then there's a hint of the opposite sign. So there's that. You got that going for you. But yeah, so when Pluto is direct, it has a little bit more of the scorpionic quality, and when it's retrograde, it has a little hint of the Aries quality of Mars. And yeah, so it can be a little bolder in that spot. Thank you for asking the question, Jessica. All right, Jen asks, when reading the horoscopes, I look at where the moon is hitting my natal chart. It varies between 3 signs usually. My sun, I know not to read for that unless that's where the moon actually is. You don't even, I'm just going to say, you don't read really for that the way I write the horoscopes. And this is an older question. Sorry, Jen, that I'm just getting to it now. In the new astrology guide, I just give you a little week summary and then something, you get a little to do. You get some homework. I just put the pages out. And so every week you get fresh pages. I basically just add to the PDF. And so you got a Mercury retrograde sheet. You got a full moon activity sheet. There's a new moon affirmation, which we're past the new moon for August, but September has that as well. There's some good stuff in each one. I'm excited for September's. So, but even when you read a horoscope, just read it for where your rising sign essentially. But if you have a late rising, so 15 degrees or more, 15 to 29, then read for your sign, but also read for the next sign. So I have a mid-degree Scorpio rising, so I read for both Scorpio and Sagittarius because the moon's going to swing through the houses that way. I've just given you guys more education around how horoscopes are written. That's it. A lot of real horoscopes. A lot of horoscopes, when you go read on blogs or in magazines, those are made up. Very rarely is it done by an actual astrologer. Usually it's a buddy of somebody at the magazine who says, I know astrology, and they just make stuff up. They might get it kind of right, but... All right, Alyssa, how do you know if a planet was retrograde in your birth chart? Usually there's a little R or an RX next to it. So if you're looking at astro.com, there'll be a little R. I think there's an RX next to it in AstroSeek. Some, my Celeste 1.2 on my phone, it'll be a red color versus the black color of the direct motion planets. So that's how you know. Now, don't freak out if you got a retrograde planet in your birth chart, okay? Because it doesn't mean bad. It doesn't. We went over that in intermediate astrology. By the way, retrograde is not beginning astrology. So if you're just getting started, don't let it distract you. Learn your basics, which the intermediate students have been finding out as we start synthesizing what they've learned in the last 13 weeks. They've been like, oh, this is why we stick with basics and then add in the other stuff, right? It's been a great couple of classes. The Natal Chart Foundations class is winding up, and so is the intermediate class. And it's been really fun teaching both classes, and my gosh, they're doing great. So Carly asks, what would you recommend to clients to get the most out of a reading? Is there certain etiquette specific to your profession or readings that may not be common knowledge, but you wish there was more awareness of? I love the message you're spreading and appreciate your content so much. Oh my gosh, Carly, thank you. Thank you so much. I think it's really important to understand there's a big difference between going to a psychic where you don't feed the reader and going to an astrologer. We need feedback. We need feedback. We don't need your life story. We don't need your life story. But it is really nice to hear, oh yeah, you got that. If we ask you questions like, hey, it could manifest like this or like this, which is it? And you go, that doesn't help. So being engaged, coming in with some questions, understanding that a natal chart reading is not really consultative, but there's a little give and take that goes on, especially feedback to the reader. And in a consultation, like the career, life path, business reading, it's for small businesses. If you just come in and you say like, read me, it's a consultation. So for me to help you, I feel a little bit like Jerry Maguire. Help me help you. Come in with some questions, like if you're wanting to start a business, and you've gotten clear, but what are you looking for help on? And just how do I make money is probably, it's too big of a question. It's too vague. So if you're looking at, hey, what's the best time for marketing? What kind of marketing? Not everybody should be selling products, and not everybody should be selling information. Not everybody's a teacher. Not everybody's an author. You could ask, where are you going to excel? So it really depends on the reading, but coming in a little bit more prepared with questions. The one thing I will also say, don't try to understand the astrology. You're there for a reading. Okay, I teach classes. If you want to learn more about your astrology chart, I have resources for that. I have classes that I teach. A reading is an interpretation and a consultation. And it's my job to be the astrologer. So if you're arguing with me about why a placement is or isn't in a chart, like, why aren't you using Chiron? Why aren't you using Lilith? Because I don't emphasize those. First of all, Lilith is made up. It's not even a real thing. I'm not talking about the myth. I'm talking about the black moon. It's not real. It's never been seen. Okay? It's never been made visible. So, let's knock that one off. People lean into that stuff when they haven't done the actual study. So, Carly, to get the most out of a reading, come prepared with questions. Step back from trying to figure out the chart. That's not going to help. My recordings, all of the readers who read under me, plus my readings, they're all recorded. You get the recording. Make sure you listen to it over and over again. I had somebody get a hold of me not long ago, and they'd focus, I go through a lot of information. Think about how much I give on the podcast. Imagine a reading with me. So, the person had something happen, and they were like, hey, do you remember the reading? They sent me a private message, and they're like, hey, if not, and I was like, I probably addressed your question in the reading. I can't guarantee it, but I'm not going to remember your reading months later or even a week later, to be honest. I've learned to let that go. It doesn't mean I don't love you, okay? But I'm going to let go of the information. I'm going to let go of the reading, because if I let my brain fill up, it's going to explode, right? There'll be too much stuff in there. So always go back and listen to the readings, because you get a recording, and that'll benefit you over time to just hear it. Thank you, Carly. I love that question. So if you want more astrology Q&A, one of the things you can do is, as a patron, fill out your questions on the Google Sheet. It's listed in, actually, before I stop this one, I've got the perfect one. Now remember, I'm going to be teaching about Chiron in September through the Planet of the Month Club. If you're a Planet of the Month Club member already, get excited. We've done Saturn. Lorena asks, is Chiron return a biggie like Saturn? No, it's not, because Saturn is a major placement in your astrological chart. Chiron is not. Chiron is a minor placement. It got a lot of marketing, okay? But we have not even had a full rotation to observe. It was discovered in 1977. Whereas we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of being able to observe Saturn. So no, the Chiron return is not a biggie. What does it mean? And is it an exact degree, a minute, or a time before and after? No, the time before and after does not count. All returns are when a planet returns exactly to the degree and minute. I know people like to talk about the process, but that's not it. Okay. So yeah, we're going to be covering Chiron. I've got a playlist of Chiron videos on TikTok. You can check that out on my TikTok channel. Oh my goodness. Let's see if I have anything else juicy. No, we'll go back to that. So, if you want more astrology Q&A, you can join the Patreon. You get your own podcast, and I'm going to head over to do part 2, where I'm going to go through what you can do with the full moon. I'm going to give you an exercise on making that work for you. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the Trumpy Dumpy, and how I think his day is going to go tomorrow. I'm going to go through the astrology of that. Oh, Schadenfreude. Well, I hope we've got perfect parking, or we got the towels folded, or the kids are going to school now and you are sitting in your car sipping on an iced coffee or a mocha, dreaming of pumpkin spice lattes to come soon. It's almost that season. I always appreciate you tuning in. You guys have made me a top 5% podcast. That's right. We're in the top 5% globally because of you. Thank you, listeners. I appreciate you. Even if you're not a patron, just listening helps us out. Make sure you share the podcast with friends. I really appreciate everyone who tunes in every week, and I love that this information has been helpful to you. And join me on TikTok Live sometimes. I loved it. Tonight we had Sunday night we had great questions. Those were awesome. So you know me, I'm a sucker for good questions. All right. Time to go do that other part of the podcast so I can go to bed. Have a wonderful week, and may you really dream a new reality with the Pisces full moon.